Hello, I'm Chris, and this is my Holley Part 8, installing a Holley carburetor. So if you watch any of my videos, this is the carburetor I run. It's a Carter 750 CFM, and I just made a Part 1 and 2 of rebuilding this carburetor. A real good video in depth, show you how to do it 100%. But in my Holley Part 4, we rebuilt this 3310-1. I'll say it 100 times not to be confused with the 3310-2 through 11. They're a completely different carburetor. So in this video, we're going to try to get this one set up. We're going to put it on the car and we're going to get it adjusted. First things first, we're going to take this off. I already have it loose. Okay, so throttle cable stays the same. Vacuum advance to our distributor stays the same. Gasket, we're going to leave it. This is a square bore pattern. It's the same thing. Not even going to change the gasket out. Notice this fitting installer, which will normally keep it capped. It's got a vacuum line going to a vacuum gauge. You will need a vacuum gauge just to initially set up your carburetor. Okay, so what I did change was I added an electric fuel pump, and you see the block off plate right there. Okay, so we're just getting in the Holleys. Go watch my videos from Part 1 where we go over rebuilding and taking them apart. Like I said, rebuilt this one in Part 4 probably about a month ago. Okay, so you notice I drilled and tapped and added that screw right there. We removed the hot air choke, and we're not running any choke on this carburetor. So we have our timed or ported vacuum right there, which is plugged. We're going to run our distributor vacuum advance right here on the bottom. Okay, we're going to go ahead and throw the fuel bowl initial adjustment way out of whack to see how hard it is or easy to adjust the fuel level. So if you watch my videos, you know I'm going to get into tuning these, and one of the things I did read about was taking the power valve out of the back. So these are the power valve block offs. I got 4 of these for $12.95 shipped to my house from eBay. First, get into tuning. You want to try to tune it without the power valve in the back, and if for some reason you have like a lean issue right there on transition to the secondaries, then you may want to add a power valve. That's my understanding, and that's why I'm doing this. And a lot of the newer Holleys, well, a lot of Holleys you buy, they go ahead and delete this anyway. So that's just what I'm going to do. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. Okay, so that gasket stayed in there 100%. I'm just going to use that gasket. Okay, tighten down pretty good. Gonna put that right back on. Snugging them up, not too tight, and then you go around them and snug them up a little better. These originally had 5/16 inlets. I changed them to 3/8. It's got one little metal gasket in there. These need to be tightened really good. Just try to get them as tight as you can. So we're gonna adjust this accelerator pump arm right here. Now I'm gonna adjust mine with 10 thousandths clearance on the feeler gauge. I forgot what Holley said, if that's what they said, or a little bit bigger, but 10 thousandths should be enough. So counterclockwise is gonna bring it closer together, and then clockwise is gonna give it more play. So first of all, just tighten it down clockwise until you got a whole bunch of play in there. See, it's real loose right now. Okay, so now we got it real loose. We need to take our fingers and gently take the slack out of it without putting any pressure on it. So we know these have slack in them. Counterclockwise and bring this out. Take the slack out very gently, and that goes in there super easy. Okay, so now that we got it close, we need to think of our screwdriver turns in half turns, quarter turns, and eighth of turns. So we got it close. Let's bring it out a quarter turn. Okay. Take the slack out. Okay, this feeling kind of tight in there, but we have 10 thousandths clearance. Okay, so let's say we want to take that slack out. Let's give it a quarter turn. Take the slack out. See, it still goes in there, but that's a super tight 10 thousandths. So that would be acceptable as 10 thousandths clearance. So let's go another quarter turn. Okay, so now it's too tight. Quarter turn back to where we were. Yes. So there you go. That's adjusted with 10 thousandths. You can see it's still instant throttle response, and we'll test it on the car when we get it running. So the next thing that's kind of confusing is that you're trying to match this Holley to your existing throttle cable. Now all throttle cables are going to have different size balls on them, so I had to buy a little box. I think it was like $12. It was kind of expensive, and my car actually uses this size ball right here. They're all different. Now I did modify that down a little bit to fit my Edelbrock or Carter, and the hole should go right in there. So let's just get this back on there. Okay, get it pretty tight. Now let's get our fuel line on here. So we're just using whatever we can get from the auto parts store. It extends out for a 4150 or 60. These are not the expensive fittings. It's just a piece of braided hose with hose clamps. Then it has a place for our gauge. All right, so I did have to buy that fitting on there. So let's just get this in the carburetor. So we made sure these were extra tight so that we don't have to hold anything with the backup wrench. We just tighten these in the best that we can. So this line right here did cost $40, and it came with a little baby gauge. We're gonna see if this thing works or not. Brass is self-sealing, but you can put some Teflon tape. On this one, I'm not gonna do it, but you can if you want to. You can see I did it right there. So if you try to tighten this on the gauge, you can seriously break the gauge and it'll never read right. Okay, so we're just gonna take the Holley and stick it on there. Okay, so I did buy a bracket for the Holley. This was $30, but it doesn't work. I might have the wrong accelerator cable, so I'm using my old bracket I had on my Edelbrock. I actually bought this at the Conroe swap meet about 15 years ago. Still have it, still works perfect. So we're using the same studs, same nuts, and same lock washers that the Edelbrock had on there. We're just gonna tighten them all down with a 1/2 inch and keep working our way around until it all feels snug and tight. Don't over tighten these, you'll crack that base plate. That's it. Accelerator cable. Now we need to get that ball hooked on there. You may need to adjust this. Okay, so I had the Edelbrock on here and I'm not even having to adjust this accelerator cable. Right where it came off. My accelerator cable goes over the ball. It has this retaining clip. So the return spring, we're gonna run it towards the front. I'm using one of the 2 springs. I just kind of stretched it out until I can find a better spring. Okay, so you barely see my thermostat housing. Has a little hole for it. I'm gonna run it from there to there. Just like that. Make sure it does not hit this. Looks good. See the little cap on a 3/8 fuel line? We're just going to show installing this little regulator. Now there's nothing wrong with this regulator. You see videos where the fuel's squirting all the way around the outside. That's because they ran too high of a fuel pressure to them. I took this one apart to figure it out. It's got a little diaphragm in there that if you run over, I guess 8 or 9 PSI, you're just going to blow it out. And if yours is leaking, just take it apart and you may be able to fix it. Soak that diaphragm in gas. But this is not a piece of crap. I know these work perfect, but of course this is just stuff you can get at your local parts house. So we're just using these types of fasteners. These are 100% acceptable if you have a barb or a bell. If you just have a straight fitting, you can't use these. You have to use hose clamps. There's nothing wrong with these. Okay, so we got 3/8 barb. We're gonna run the line up there to right there with the fuel filter. Now I was talking bad about the microguard because the glue comes undone, which it did. We're gonna try these wicks out, and it looks to be made a little bit different. Hopefully we can start using these. Fuel regulator up to the carb. Everything looks good. Okay, so I added an electric fuel pump, and I made this little momentary setup I'll keep in my glove box where I can just bypass 8586 on the relay and turn it on from out here to set my fuel level and just to make sure my fuel pump is working. We got it wired to 85 and 86 on the relay, and we're just gonna hook this up to battery, and then when we hit this, turn our fuel pump on without having to turn the car on or mess with it. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna turn the fuel pump on, and we're gonna make sure we can get fuel into that filter. So electric fuel pump is working. See, we got gas running out of the carburetor already. Okay, so you see we got fuel running out. That's because I screwed the initial adjustments up on the floats. So let's take those side plugs out and get these floats adjusted. Okay, so I'm going to use an old work shirt to put it under there while we adjust these floats. So when we turn the fuel pump on, we're looking for that fuel to be even with that side plug. Okay, so the initial adjustment, I guess it's very important because somebody told me to try to adjust the floats without initial adjustment, and that's what I'm doing right now, and it's kind of difficult. So let's go through the process. So we got the side plug out, loosen this. Now these increments are super small. You're not doing full turns, you're doing like quarter turns and half turns. And then whenever you get your adjustment, you have to tighten this back down. So let's just randomly see if we got it adjusted. Okay, there's nothing coming out. It says shake the car. It's coming out a little bit, but we want a little more than that. So now we got it coming out a little bit. We're gonna tighten it down about 1/8 of a turn. See, just barely dripping. We shake the car. That's where I'm gonna set mine. So you gotta be careful when you do this. We're doing this in an open garage. I have an air compressor where I can blow the air out and a fan. And then whenever you get a level right there, you're gonna shake the car and it should just barely trickle out. So I'm gonna hit the fuel pump one more time. Let's see if we got that float adjustment right. See how it's barely trickling out right there? We move the car, that's it. We can go ahead and put our sight plug back in. That's where I want it. Okay, so when you got it adjusted, you wanna tighten all this up real tight so it doesn't leak any gas. Pretty tight. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing with the rear one. Oh, what the fuck? You see screwing the initial adjustment up, it's way out of whack. Counterclockwise raises the level, clockwise lowers the level. We need to lower the level. Okay. We're going to dry it up a little bit, let it settle down, and we're going to check it one more time before we lock it down. Okay, we're going to hit that fuel pump and it's barely going to trickle out of that hole. Can you see it barely trickling? Okay, and then we shake the car and there it goes. That's where I'm going to leave it. Pretty tight. Tighten that down. So I just want to include that so you can see how hard it can be to adjust floats without that initial adjustment. So be sure you do that when you rebuild your carburetor. So we got the floats adjusted. You need to make sure that all that gas is evaporated or cleaned up, because I spilled a bunch of gas trying to adjust these floats just now. So since the level and the fuel bowls are set, we should be able to hit our accelerator pump and fuel squirts down the middle. All right, that's working real good. Okay, so we got our vacuum advance from our carburetor. This is timed or ported vacuum, and then we have manifold vacuum down here at the bottom. That's where we're going to connect it. Okay, see that under there? Okay, so this Holley only has one port on the back for a 3/8 line. So for right now, we're just going to run the PCV valve right there, but in the future, we're going to have to tee off to run to our brake booster too. You can't see this one, just take my word for it. So this is the first Holley I've ever put on a car and started. We're gonna see how easy this thing is to get adjusted. So first time on YouTube ever, firing up my first Holley. Okay, that was good. So the Holley started right up. Let's adjust the idle. I forgot to do that. Okay, so when you run a carburetor for the first time, you want to take your idle adjustment and run it out until the throttle blades seat in the bores. Okay, and then just raise it back up a little bit. So I guess I had it okay to give it some air so it can run at first. Let's try to start that thing again. Okay, so I completely forgot that this is also a cold start. So for the first time, starting a Holley and a cold start combined, this thing's working pretty good so far. So we're gonna get it idling and we're gonna adjust the idle fuel mixture screws. Okay, so we're just doing a super quick style carburetor adjustment. We should have the car warmed up, but we don't have time for it. Now you see the vacuum gauge in the back, the car idles around 15. So on the gauge 0, 10, 15, 20, just so you'll see we're trying to get it right in the middle of 15 and 20. We're the best that we can. So we're gonna do it cold and hopefully we get it close. Okay, Okay, so that smoke is actually from the oil dummy light switch. It blew up, it squirted oil everywhere. So let's see if it starts up. Okay, so the engine has not even warmed up, but so far I'm real pleased with it. Hopefully I can get this thing running super smooth. It does not run as smooth as the Edelbrock at first start, but hopefully we can get that adjusted. And let's see how it cranks up after about 30 minutes. Hear that fuel pump? I don't know if you can. Alright. So that's it for the video. I believe I'm a Holley man from now on. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.